A single worn glove in the bitter Chicago cold becomes the unlikely catalyst that transforms a homeless woman's despair into extraordinary power. When Maya Johnson helps a crying boy on Michigan Avenue, she has no idea his father is the billionaire whose company destroyed her life. This breathtaking story of sacrifice, justice, and redemption reveals how humanity can shine through life's darkest moments and how the smallest gesture of kindness can topple corporate empires. From sleeping in abandoned buildings to speaking at the United Nations, Maya's journey will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about success, power, and human connection. This is a story that will change how you see the invisible people around you forever. If this touches your heart, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that remind us who we truly are when no one is watching. Blood trickled down Tyler Wilson's knee, his sobs piercing the bitter Chicago winter air like shattered glass. Yet the stream of hurried pedestrians flowed around him as if he were merely another obstacle on Michigan Avenue. Maya Johnson watched from her makeshift cardboard shelter, her stomach screaming with 3 days of hunger, but something in the child's cry cut deeper than her own pain. "Hey there, little man, that looks like it hurts," Maya said, approaching the boy despite the suspicious glances from passers-by who quickened their steps. Her dark, weathered hands trembled not from the 15-degree temperature, but from the knowledge that helping this child might cost her the only protection she had against Chicago's merciless January winds. Without hesitation, Maya pulled off her threadbare gloves-donated items she'd waited 3 hours in line to receive yesterday and gently pressed one against Tyler's bleeding knee. "We need to keep it clean, buddy. Infection's no joke in this weather." 20 feet away, Alexander Wilson stood frozen, his Italian leather shoes rooted to the salt-stained sidewalk. His hand instinctively tightened around his $7,000 briefcase as he watched a homeless woman touching his son. His first impulse was to signal his security team, but for reasons he couldn't articulate, he hesitated. Perhaps it was the careful precision of her movements, or the way Tyler's sobs had instantly quieted to sniffles under her attention. "What happened, champ?" Maya asked, her voice carrying the warmth her circumstances had long ago stolen from her body. She carefully tied Tyler's loose shoelace with fingers nearly numb from exposure. "Looks like someone was in a big hurry." "I wanted to see the ice sculptures," Tyler replied, pointing toward Millennium Park. "My name's Tyler. I'm 8. Maya smiled, revealing surprisingly perfect teeth, a remnant of her previous life that she guarded fiercely. "Nice to meet you, Tyler. I'm Maya." As she wrapped her remaining glove around Tyler's small hand to warm it, he looked at her with innocent curiosity. "Why are you sitting on cardboard? Aren't you cold?" The silence that followed hung heavy as Lake Michigan fog. Alexander felt his face burn with shame, his hand halfway raised to interrupt what promised to be an uncomfortable exchange. But Maya's response stunned him. "Because not everyone gets the same chances in life, little one," she said without a trace of self-pity. Her voice carried the steady wisdom of someone who had accepted harsh truths without surrendering her dignity. "Sometimes we lose everything, our home, our job, even our family, but we never lose our humanity. That's something no one can take unless you give it away." The words hit Alexander like a physical blow. Just last month, he had dismissed a proposal for employee housing assistance during a board meeting, arguing that financial hardship is usually the result of poor personal choices. Now, he watched as a woman who clearly owned nothing share half of what little she had with a complete stranger. Maya's stomach growled audibly as she stood, brushing snow from her tattered coat. The sound reminded her that she had traded her meal voucher for these very gloves after hearing about frostbite cases among the homeless community. She refused to regret the choice, even as hunger clawed at her insides. "Dad!" Tyler finally spotted Alexander and ran toward him, one small hand still wrapped in Maya's glove. "Dad, look! This nice lady helped me when I fell." Maya was already backing away, disappearing into the crowd with practiced invisibility. The last thing she needed was confrontation with another wealthy parent who thought her mere existence was a threat. "Wait!" Alexander called, but she had vanished, leaving only a single worn glove and an uncomfortable weight in his chest that felt suspiciously like awakening. No one expected their paths would cross again, yet fate had already woven their stories together with invisible threads. As Alexander Wilson carried his son back to their penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, Maya Johnson trudged through deepening snow toward the overcrowded shelter she occasionally called home. "Dad, why did that lady disappear so fast?" Tyler asked, still clutching Maya's worn glove like a treasure. Alexander had no easy answer. The truth that people like him had spent decades perfecting the art of not seeing people like her felt suddenly shameful on his tongue. 14 floors below Maya's feet, in the parking garage of Wilson Tower, Alexander's executive team finalized plans for the Chicago Renaissance Initiative that would demolish 3 homeless shelters for luxury condominiums. The same initiative Maya had desperately fought against 3 years ago as a promising HR specialist at Meridian Corporation before everything fell apart. That night, as Tyler slept in his temperature-controlled bedroom, surrounded by more toys than he could count, Maya sat on a thin shelter mattress, her reflection staring back from a cracked bathroom mirror. "My name is Maya Johnson. I have a bachelor's in business administration from Northwestern and 3 years of specialized experience in corporate diversity initiatives," she whispered, rehearsing for an interview that would never come. Tears slid down her cheeks, but her voice never wavered. This nightly ritual was all that remained of her former self. The shelter's fluorescent lights flickered, illuminating a small photo she kept hidden in her worn backpack, an ultrasound image of the baby she had lost to the system. The memory crashed over her like a physical blow. She had been 5 months pregnant when Thomas Edwards, Wilson Global's HR director, had smiled thinly across his mahogany desk and said, "Your pregnancy raises concerns about your commitment level. We need someone who can fully dedicate themselves to our corporate culture." 2 weeks later, eviction notices appeared throughout her apartment, building another property acquired by Wilson Global Investments. With no income, no home, and dwindling options, Maya had fought to keep her baby after birth, but the state deemed her unable to provide adequate stability and placed her newborn daughter with a foster family. One day, she whispered to the ultrasound, her voice cracking, "One day I'll get you back. I promise." Across town, Alexander sat in his home office, Tyler's words echoing in his mind. "The lady's glove kept me warm, Dad. But now her hand must be really cold." He stared at the signature on the bottom of the Chicago Renaissance Initiative proposal. His own. The same initiative that had directly contributed to a 40% increase in the city's homeless population over the past 2 years. For the first time in his career, Alexander hesitated before approving the final phase. Instead, he opened his laptop and typed, "Homeless woman, Chicago gloves." The search yielded nothing. How do you find someone society had deliberately made invisible? "Mr. Wilson." His assistant's voice interrupted through the intercom. "Mr. Edwards needs your signature on the shelter closure permits. The development team is waiting." Alexander looked down at his son's sleeping form in the doorway, Maya's glove still clutched in his small hand. Something had shifted today, crack in the foundation of certainty upon which he had built his empire. "Tell them I'll need to review the impact assessments again," he replied, surprising even himself. Then he gently removed the worn glove from Tyler's grip and placed it in his desk drawer. A reminder of something he couldn't quite name, but suddenly couldn't ignore. But the tragedy was just beginning. 3 days after her encounter with Tyler, Maya returned to the shelter to find police barricades and a crowd of confused residents clutching their meager possessions. A red notice plastered across the entrance announced, "Property closed for redevelopment by order of Wilson Global Investments." "You have 30 minutes to collect your belongings," announced an officer with practiced indifference. The temperature had plummeted to -15 degrees, and the nearest alternative shelter was 5 miles away, an impossible journey on foot through the snowstorm that had paralyzed Chicago's public transportation. "Where are we supposed to go?" demanded Elijah, a 73-year-old veteran who had occupied the bunk beside Maya's for the past year. The tremor in his hands had nothing to do with his age and everything to do with the fear gripping them all. "That's not my department," replied the officer, checking his watch. "I'm just here to secure the premises." Maya gathered her backpack containing everything she owned: 2 changes of clothes, her daughter's ultrasound, a dog-eared resume, and a nearly empty tube of toothpaste she rationed like gold. As the crowd dispersed into the swirling snow, Maya noticed Elijah standing motionless, paralyzed by the brutal reality of their situation. "Come on," she said, taking his arm. I know a place. The abandoned office building on Wacker Drive had been her fallback during previous shelter closures, a dangerous but necessary option when the alternative was freezing to death. Hours later, huddled beneath a salvaged tarp in what had once been an executive suite, Maya wrapped her single remaining glove around Elijah's blue-tinged fingers. His breathing had grown shallow, his consciousness fading as hypothermia took hold. "Stay with me," she pleaded, wrapping her arms around him and sharing what little body heat remained in her exhausted frame. "Tell me about your daughter in Phoenix." Her voice cracked with desperation as she fought to keep him engaged. Through the broken window, the gleaming Wilson Tower stood illuminated against the night sky, a monument to wealth barely 6 blocks away, yet separated by an unbridgeable chasm of circumstance. That night, Maya didn't sleep. Instead, she kept Elijah alive through sheer force of will, talking about everything and nothing until dawn broke and his color slowly returned. She had saved a life while her own continued to unravel. As morning light filtered through the broken windows, a woman in a practical but expensive coat appeared in the doorway. "Maya Johnson?" she called, scanning the huddled figures. Maya tensed, immediately suspicious. No one looked for people like her unless they wanted something or worse, were from social services with more bad news about her daughter. "My name is Carmen Rivera, Executive Director of Justice First Foundation," the woman explained, extending a business card that Maya reluctantly accepted. "Marcus at the shelter told me where to find you before they closed it down." Carmen surveyed the space, her expression revealing neither pity nor judgment. "I understand you have a business degree and corporate experience. We need someone who understands both sides of the economic divide for our housing justice initiative." She paused, then added, "It pays." Maya's exhaustion-clouded mind struggled to process what she was hearing. A job? Now? When she hadn't showered in days and had spent the night keeping an elderly man alive in an abandoned building? "Why me?" she asked, voice hoarse from the long night. "Because you have something that can't be taught," Carmen replied. "Integrity under impossible circumstances. And because your expertise on Wilson Global's housing displacement strategies would be invaluable." Little did Maya know that across town, Alexander Wilson was initiating a search for her, driven by his son's persistent questions and his own growing unease about the empire he had built. If this story of resilience in the face of overwhelming odds has touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share these powerful stories of human connection in a divided world. What would you do if you were in Maya's position? Share your thoughts in the comments below and join us for part 4, where Maya discovers the shocking connection between her past and her future. The revelation hit Maya like a thunderbolt. 3 weeks into her research position at Justice First Foundation, she found herself staring at a photograph that made her blood run cold. There, smiling from the glossy page of Chicago Business Monthly, stood none other than Alexander Wilson with his son Tyler. The same boy whose knee she had bandaged on Michigan Avenue. The same family whose company had systematically dismantled her life. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Carmen commented, noticing Maya's frozen expression as she flipped through the magazine. Maya couldn't find her voice. The universe had a cruel sense of irony, placing her fate in the hands of the very man whose policies had left her homeless and childless. "It's nothing," Maya lied, quickly turning the page. Something told her to keep this connection to herself, at least until she understood what it meant. Was this cosmic justice or a trap waiting to ensnare her? Meanwhile, across town, Alexander Wilson sat in his corner office, reviewing a disturbing report his private investigator had compiled. "We've identified 17 former employees who became homeless after termination from Wilson Global subsidiaries," the investigator explained. "Most concerning is the pattern of pregnant women being let go for performance issues shortly after announcing their pregnancies." Alexander's stomach tightened. "And the woman who helped my son? Any leads?" "Nothing concrete yet, sir. But we're cross-referencing employment records with shelter registrations." Alexander dismissed the investigator and turned to the window, his reflection superimposed over the Chicago skyline he had helped shape. For 2 decades, he had trusted Thomas Edwards to handle HR efficiently, never questioning the methods behind the company's remarkable productivity statistics. Now, pieces were falling into place that painted a disturbing picture. Back at Justice First, Maya methodically built her case. Each document she uncovered revealed a more sinister pattern than the last. Wilson Global didn't just displace the homeless, they created homelessness through targeted terminations and strategic property acquisitions. The evidence was damning, but the most shocking discovery came buried in a confidential memo written by Thomas Edwards himself. Pregnancy discrimination claims can be neutralized by documenting performance concerns 3 months prior to termination. See attached list of current liability risks. Maya's hands trembled as she scrolled down to find her own name at the top of the list, alongside a notation that made her heart stop. Potential high-profile discrimination case. Subject has evidence of targeted termination. Recommend immediate action to secure building and expedite eviction process. They hadn't just fired her. They had deliberately fast-tracked her eviction to destabilize her life so thoroughly that she couldn't fight back. The calculation of it all made her physically ill. That night, as she worked late organizing evidence, Maya noticed a familiar black sedan parked outside the foundation offices. It was the same vehicle she had spotted 3 times that week. Someone was watching her. Across the city, Tyler Wilson sat on his bed, still holding Maya's glove. "Dad, did you find the lady yet?" he asked as Alexander tucked him in. "Not yet, buddy. But I'm not giving up," Alexander replied, his determination genuine. What he couldn't tell his son was that finding her had become about more than returning a glove or saying thank you. It had become about facing the human cost of his success, a cost he was only beginning to comprehend. In her small rented room, the first private space she'd had in years, Maya faced an ethical crossroads. The evidence she'd gathered could destroy Wilson Global and everyone connected to it, including a little boy who had shown her nothing but innocent kindness. But it could also force accountability for thousands of lives ruined by corporate greed, potentially including the return of her own daughter from foster care. As she stared at Tyler's photo, Maya whispered, "What's the right thing to do when justice for many means hurting an innocent few?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, as 2 parallel searches, Alexander's for Maya and Maya's for truth, converged toward an inevitable collision. The moment of truth arrived sooner than anyone anticipated. Under the soaring glass atrium of Wilson Tower, Chicago's business elite gathered for the annual Diversity Leadership Summit, a glossy spectacle of corporate social responsibility that Maya now understood was built entirely on lies. She stood in the back row, nearly unrecognizable in the professional attire provided by Justice First Foundation, her heart pounding so loudly she feared others might hear it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thomas Edwards announced with practiced charm, "Wilson Global Investments is proud to present our expanded diversity initiatives for the coming year." His polished smile never reached his eyes as he gestured toward charts displaying impressive statistics, the same statistics Maya now knew were systematically falsified. From his seat at the center of the stage, Alexander Wilson surveyed the audience with growing discomfort. The private investigator's latest report lay heavy in his inside pocket, documented evidence of Edwards' systematic discrimination against pregnant employees, minority candidates, and whistleblowers. Among them, a woman whose description matched the homeless person who had helped Tyler, a former HR specialist named Maya Johnson. "We now welcome representatives from our community partner organizations to discuss our collaborative approach to social inclusion," Edwards continued smoothly. "First, from Justice First Foundation, Maya Johnson." A collective gasp rippled through the audience as Maya walked steadily toward the stage, her eyes locked on Edwards. The man who had destroyed her life now stood frozen, recognition dawning in his widening eyes. "Thank you," Maya began, her voice calm despite the storm raging inside her. "3 years ago, I sat across from Mr. Edwards in a job interview for Wilson Global's HR department." She paused, letting the connection sink in. "He informed me my pregnancy raised concerns about my commitment level." Edwards coughed nervously. "I believe we've strayed from the topic at hand." 6 months later, Maya continued as if uninterrupted, "I was homeless. 3 months after that, my newborn daughter was taken by the state." Her voice never wavered, but tears now streamed freely down her face. "Today, I stand before you not as a victim seeking sympathy, but as evidence of a systematic pattern." With precise movements, Maya activated the presentation she had prepared. The screen filled with internal emails, performance reviews, and demographic data, revealing an undeniable pattern of discrimination. Wilson Global doesn't just displace the homeless, it creates homelessness by targeting vulnerable employees, then purchasing their apartment buildings for redevelopment. As the damning evidence mounted on screen, Tyler's voice suddenly pierced the stunned silence. "Dad, it's the glove lady!" The 8-year-old broke free from his nanny's grip and ran toward Maya, his face lit with recognition. Security personnel moved instinctively toward Maya, but Alexander stood abruptly. "Stand down," he commanded, his voice echoing through the atrium. All eyes turned to the CEO as he walked deliberately toward Maya. Edward stepped forward, desperation in his eyes. "Mr. Wilson, this is clearly an orchestrated attack on our company. We should remove her immediately." "Enough." Alexander's voice cut like steel. The room fell silent as he faced Maya directly, recognition and regret etched across his features. "Miss Johnson is exactly where she belongs." Tyler reached Maya first, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I kept your gloves safe," he said, looking up at her with innocent joy, completely unaware of the tension electrifying the room. Maya's carefully constructed composure threatened to shatter. Here was the innocent child who had shown her kindness amid her darkest days, now unwittingly standing between her and justice against his father's company. Alexander knelt to his son's level. "Tyler, this is the lady who helped you when you fell, the one I've been looking for." Then, rising to face Maya and the stunned audience, he spoke words no one expected. "And she's right about everything." The collective gasp that swept through the auditorium marked the exact moment when the carefully crafted facade of Wilson Global Investments began to crumble, along with the walls Alexander had built around his conscience. 6 months passed like a whirlwind of change. The morning's Chicago Tribune headline read, "Wilson Global's Remarkable Transformation. From Corporate Villain to Social Justice Pioneer." The cover photo showed Maya Johnson and Alexander Wilson at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the first Second Chance Center, built on the same site where Maya had once sought shelter. What no one could have predicted was how completely Alexander Wilson would embrace accountability, not just with words, but with actions that reverberated throughout the business world. "The first time I saw Maya, she was helping my son while I stood paralyzed by my own prejudice," Alexander admitted in his first major interview after the summit. "She was invisible to the corporate world I had built. Today, she is our moral compass and the architect of our most important initiatives." The transformation began immediately after the summit. Thomas Edwards faced criminal charges for document falsification and workplace discrimination. Alexander publicly acknowledged his own complicity through years of willful ignorance and established a $50 million fund to compensate former employees affected by discriminatory practices. But the most meaningful change came in the complete restructuring of Wilson Global's mission. "We're no longer in the business of development for profit alone," Alexander explained during a community forum at the Second Chance Center. "Every project must now meet our triple standard: economic viability, community benefit, and displacement prevention." For Maya, the professional vindication paled in comparison to her personal journey. On a crisp autumn morning, she stood nervously outside the Cook County Family Services building, her hand trembling as she checked her watch for the 5th time in as many minutes. "You've got this," Alexander reassured her, standing respectfully at a distance. He had insisted on driving her personally, but understood this moment belonged to Maya alone. The doors opened, and a social worker emerged holding the hand of a 3-year-old girl with Maya's eyes and determined chin. "Olivia," the social worker said gently, "this is your mommy." Maya knelt, her vision blurring with tears. "Hi, sweetheart," she whispered, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I've been looking for you for so long." Olivia studied Maya cautiously before asking, "Are you the lady from the picture?" She pointed to the worn ultrasound photo Maya had included in every care package sent during their separation. "Yes, baby, that's me." Maya opened her arms, not daring to breathe. What happened next would remain etched in Maya's memory forever. Olivia took 3 hesitant steps forward, then suddenly launched herself into Maya's embrace with complete abandon. The dam broke, and Maya's careful composure dissolved into sobs of joy as she held her daughter for the first time in nearly 3 years. From the car, Alexander watched silently, his own eyes not entirely dry. Tyler sat beside him, clutching a small gift bag he had insisted on bringing. "Can I give it to her now, Dad?" he asked eagerly. "Let's give them a moment, buddy," Alexander replied softly. Later that afternoon, as Olivia explored her new room in Maya's recently purchased townhouse of property, surprisingly distant from any Wilson Global developments, Tyler presented his carefully wrapped gift, a brand new pair of gloves, sized perfectly for Olivia. "So your hands never get cold," he explained seriously. Maya's transformation extended beyond her personal life. As the newly appointed Director of Social Impact at Wilson Global, she had implemented the Project Glove initiative, which had already provided transitional housing and job training for over 200 people experiencing homelessness. The program's name, suggested by Tyler, served as a daily reminder that small acts of kindness could spark systemic change. What surprised everyone, however, was Alexander's own transformation. The billionaire who once dismissed homelessness as a personal failure now spent every Wednesday morning serving breakfast at the Second Chance Center, no cameras allowed, learning the names and stories of people he once would have walked past without a glance. What began as a single act of kindness on a snowy Chicago street had grown into something extraordinary. 2 years after Maya and Alexander's confrontation at the Diversity Summit, the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the 10th Second Chance Center brought together an unlikely gathering corporate leaders, community advocates, and formerly homeless individuals now employed as program directors. The Wilson-Johnson model, as it had come to be known in business schools across the country, had sparked a revolution in corporate responsibility. Maya stood at the podium, poised and confident in a way that would have been unimaginable during her days on the streets. "Transformation isn't just about changing policies," she told the assembled crowd. "It's about changing perspective, about seeing the humanity in every person, regardless of their circumstances." Her gaze drifted to the front row, where 10-year-old Tyler sat beside Olivia, now 5 and thriving. The children had formed an unbreakable bond, with Tyler appointing himself as Olivia's unofficial big brother and fiercest protector. Behind the podium hung a framed, worn glove encased in glass, the catalyst that had connected their lives and launched a movement. It had become the unofficial symbol of their work, a reminder that the most profound changes often begin with the smallest gestures. As Maya concluded her speech, an aide approached with an envelope bearing the presidential seal. "It's official," she whispered to Alexander. "The Corporate Accountability Act passed the Senate. The legislation, inspired by Wilson Global's voluntary transparency reforms, would require companies nationwide to report on displacement impact before development projects and protect employees from discriminatory termination." What had started as one company's redemption was becoming national policy. Later that evening, as celebrations wound down, Maya found a quiet moment with Alexander on the rooftop garden of the Centera, stark contrast to the abandoned building where she had once fought to keep Elijah alive during that brutal winter night. "Did you ever imagine we'd end up here?" Alexander asked, gazing out at the Chicago skyline that now included 10 illuminated Second Chance centers. "Never," Maya admitted. "I was focused on survival, not changing the world." Their contemplation was interrupted by Tyler and Olivia bursting through the door, excitement radiating from their faces. "Mom, we have a surprise for you," Olivia exclaimed, bouncing on her toes. Tyler stepped forward solemnly, presenting a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. "We made this for you both." Inside lay 2 handcrafted bracelets woven from red and blue threads. "Red for the glove that started everything," Tyler explained, "and blue for the cold that brought you together." As Maya slipped the bracelet onto her wrist, a text alert chimed on her phone. It was from Carmen Rivera at Justice First Foundation. "Turn on Channel 7 now." Alexander pulled out his tablet, and they gathered around to see Thomas Edwards being led from his home in handcuffs. The news crawler explained, "Former executive indicted for systematic discrimination after 27 former employees come forward with new evidence." "Justice comes full circle," Alexander murmured, his expression solemn. The following morning, Maya stood before a United Nations panel on corporate responsibility and poverty reduction. She wore her simple bracelet and carried something special, the original worn glove that Tyler had kept safe, now preserved as a reminder of where it all began. The greatest obstacle facing those in poverty isn't lack of resources, she told the international audience. It's invisibility. When we fail to see each other's humanity, we enable systems that crush the vulnerable. As cameras flashed and world leaders leaned forward to listen, Maya held up the preserved glove. This belonged to a homeless woman who had nothing but still chose to give. That woman was me. And I stand before you today not because I'm exceptional, but because someone finally chose to see me first, a child with an open heart, then a man willing to confront his own failings. The impact of her words reached far beyond that assembly. In boardrooms and shelters across America, the glove protocol was becoming shorthand for compassionate corporate policies that prioritized human dignity over profit margins. That evening, as Maya tucked Olivia into bed, her daughter asked the question that had become their nightly ritual. "Tell me again how you and Tyler met." Maya smiled, settling beside her daughter. "It began on the coldest day in Chicago, when a little boy fell down and no one stopped to help." What Maya had come to understand was that true transformation rarely happens in dramatic moments. Instead, it grows in the quiet spaces between kindness given and kindness returned, between seeing and being seen, between falling down and the hand that helps you rise again. Maya's journey from that frozen Chicago sidewalk to international recognition reminds us that true wealth isn't measured in buildings or bank accounts, but in the courage to see humanity where others see only circumstances. Her story isn't just about personal redemption or corporate transformation. It's about the invisible threads that connect all of us in a shared fabric of responsibility. I've walked alongside countless individuals whose lives were shattered by systems designed to overlook them, and I can tell you that Maya's path, though dramatized, here reflects the genuine struggle and resilience I witness daily in America's forgotten corners. The most profound truth isn't that homelessness can happen to anyone. It's that anyone can be the hand that guides another from darkness back into light. The glove that Maya gave to Tyler wasn't just an act of kindness, it was a transfer of power. A moment when someone with nothing offered dignity to someone who had everything but didn't recognize its true worth. In your own life, you'll face countless opportunities to see past appearances, to recognize the humanity in those society has trained you to ignore. These moments aren't just moral tests. They're invitations to participate in a more compassionate world. If this story stirred something in your heart, a recognition of our shared vulnerability, or the power we each hold to transform systems, please take a moment to like this video and share your own experiences in the comments below. Each story shared becomes another thread in the tapestry of awareness that makes invisible struggles visible. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge comfortable assumptions and reveal the extraordinary courage found in ordinary lives. Because sometimes, the most revolutionary act isn't changing the world, it's changing how we see it, one human connection at a time.